Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another edition of the Wealth Cafe. And we are having a coffee conversation today with the incredible Angela Williams, who is a good friend of mine. But in addition to that, she is also a licensed therapist, executive coach, and corporate trainer. And she is the founder of Angela Marie Coaching. She has over 15 years of experience in psychology, leadership, and mindset coaching. And she helps high achievers, entrepreneurs, executives, and athletes break free from stress, rewire their mindset, which we're going to dive into today, and create a life of success, well-being, and joy. As the creator of the Elevated Success Framework, Angela teaches leaders how to build careers and businesses that fuel both high performance and personal fulfillment. It's amazing we can do both. She has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, Medium, Authority Magazine, Bustle, and more, sharing insights on mental health, leadership, and career growth. Hi, Angela. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. That was a mouthful. That was fun.
That was good, right? I was like, this is to see if I can actually read. This is good timing for this.
Perfect.
Well, I am so glad you are here. You and I have a lot of conversations, and we have over the years talking about not only mindset, but mindset when it comes to money and building wealth. I feel like our worlds really collide. So I would love to just to give us a little bit of more insight into your practice, how you work with people, and then we were going to dive into all things wealth and having a wealthy mindset.
Yes, thank you. All right, so I have two businesses at the time of this recording. I have a private practice where I'm working with folks on their trauma, and some of those things happen to be related to money traumas. So, whether folks have, started a business that has gone bankrupt, they had to close it down, whether they, have that scarcity mindset from growing up without, many resources or really kind of struggling, surviving almost, right? Paycheck to paycheck and things like that. So we work a lot of that, with a lot of that in my therapy practice. So it's present there. A lot of the work that I do is using EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing tools
Hmm.
to help not only overcome those traumatic past experiences, but also rewire our brain towards wealth growth, and positive beliefs about wealth. And so, in my coaching practice, that's my other business where I'm teaching, coaching, consulting with leaders. It's really about understanding what your money story was, and is now. So, how those two things relate, and then how you want it to look in the future, and doing that deep subconscious work to, again, overturn some of those beliefs that feel familiar, but they're not helpful, right? So, we want to make what you want to see in your life and your future, all those goals and dreams you have, we want to make that familiar. We want to make abundance and wealth, exciting topics, best case scenario topics, right? We
Yeah.
want to really flip the script on how we process that.
Which is so interesting too, because I love talking to people about their money stories. And I think with so many people in a financial practice, they're so quick for, in my world, to say, like, okay, let's just talk about like your investments and this and make a plan. There's so much that goes into people's past history with money, their traumas. And I think there's something different when people can work with you and take the time to slow down and say, why do I believe this about my money and my wealth? And
100%.
yeah.
Go ahead. Let me say
No, I
something.
was going to say, like, I'd love to unpack to talking more about people's money stories.
Yes, yes. So, what's interesting is that, I just had a baby kind of recently. And, I think about how, this child was born into the world knowing nothing about money. He still has no clue what money is, right? Like he's just, playing, living his best life. And it's like, we create our money story based on our lived experiences, what we observe, what we hear, what we see going on, how it impacts us. And so, it's very just like kind of almost like an interesting experiment to think about, okay, what did I hear? What did I see growing up? And, how do I want to form that for my child? And so I'm trying to be very also cognizant of the wording and like more so than ever before of my language and my attitude, my energy expression around money and wealth and all of that. So that is an interesting perspective that I've just recently kind of taken on myself. Um, but when we talk about money stories with clients, it's a lot of times people will come, to the table, to you, to me, and say, I'm either making a ton of money, but I can't keep it, or
Yeah.
right, like I don't, so there's definitely some strategy that needs to go into that, where to put what and when and all of that. And that's your specialty, right? That's where you come in and shine. For me, it's okay, well, why are we spending 75% of what we're making? Why are we investing in things that we're not using? Why are we buying, all of these luxurious items that maybe you use once or not, or, not
Yeah.
you actually care about. And we have to dig all those layers deeper back into the subconscious. Like, where does this come from? And we find out things such as, oh, when I grew up, all the money that came in, we all, we had to spend it right away because there was bills. There
Hmm.
was, if we wanted to eat, right? It's like it came in, it came out. And that's what I saw over and over. That's the pattern. So that's what's happening here, right? So we have to kind of dig to get there because sometimes we don't make that connection. So a lot of the times when I'm working with clients, it's all about making that connection. And the awareness is such a big piece. When we're aware of something, when we see it, it's hard to unsee it, right? So when we can see
Hmm.
the patterns, we can at least go, okay, wait, this is happening, versus just kind of going on autopilot, not even aware of what's going on. So that's the first step. And, other money stories of, when I'm buying, all these luxurious gifts for people, or, myself or whatever, it's usually, the things that we all want and need. We want to be loved, we want to be heard, we want to be seen, we want to be cared for, we want to be included, right? So a lot of those themes come up. Am I enough? Am I lovable? Right? Am I a failure? Right? So all of these behaviors that we have, these actions, that not just going for money, right? But that's what we're talking about today. But it all kind of goes back to, what are those core beliefs that we have, that we've created, or that we've kind of experienced, really, from our lived experience, right? That get kind of imprinted in our brain, and that's where we continue to operate from. So that is the majority of the deep work that we're doing together, is understanding, what are those original events that have happened, what are those beliefs that have been formed, that now, still to this very day, dictate the thoughts, feelings, and behavior that are coming, out of this.
I also find it so interesting too because I work with a lot of families, right? And so it'll be like, oh, I start working with, one person and they're like, oh, you need to meet my siblings. Oh, you need to meet my friends. And you can have two siblings that grew up in the same household, similar ages, and have such wildly different ways that they saw their parents experience money. Like you can
Mhm.
have two siblings and they're like, we never had money, so now I need to have as much money as possible. And then you'll have another sibling that's like, oh, my parents spent a ton of money, which is why we never had any money. So I do the same thing and I spend it. And to me, that to me is the most interesting thing to watch is like how each person reacts individually to different life events like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also find that super fascinating because, again, not just in money, but just in so many other different things, relationships, right? Like the way that they perceive love. I mean, all the different areas can happen. And it's like, I even sometimes say to my sister, like, did we grow up in the same house? Like, what happened here? Like, so it is very fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to, um, birth order, right? There's so many
Mhm.
different pieces there, that can impact, and parents maybe having a different experience when it comes to parenting one child or another child. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and then we all have our own ways of coping with stress too. So
Yeah.
if for example, someone might be addicted to gambling, another person might be addicted to alcohol, right? So there might be some different ways that people can show behaviors that maybe aren't very helpful. Maybe they're more in the self-sabotage, but in reality, they're actually there to protect us, to distract us from our stress. But the whole point of that is that, everybody has their different way of handling things. And that is fascinating, because it's like, why wouldn't the same people, the same family, why wouldn't they have the same thing?
Right. Which I love to like hear those little stories. Like I'll be working with a client and they'll say like, well, my parents hid money under the mattress, or my parents saved everything that came in the door, or my parents, spent because they grew up during a time when there was so much economic uncertainty and they didn't know what tomorrow would bring. So when we grow up and we take on, and it's so subconscious, right? Like you don't realize it until now. You'll say certain things or you'll do certain things and you're like, oh my God, I'm my parents. And I always find that interesting Let's talk about rewiring a lot of that, right? Because we do live in, I always think back to my grandmother. She grew up, she's still alive. She grew up in the Great Depression. Like those were her most formative years. So much that she does is in reaction to, right? Like the people were jumping out of buildings because the stock market was losing money at a rapid rate and they were losing everything. And so I'm very fortunate to now be living in a time when that's not happening. Even when we have volatility, like we are not afraid of tomorrow.
Right.
How do we begin to rewire and rewrite those stories?
Also, a quick point on that, the Great Depression era, that's really fascinating because where some people will spend in order to, kind of justify it of, ooh, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep.
My grandmother on the one of them on the opposite side had the hoarding, the opposite, right? So
Mhm.
that's a really interesting, and we see that a lot play out with um, individuals, money where they spend a lot or they hoard resources, right? And again, that's still kind of showing that scarcity mindset, right? When we think about that.
Oh,
Um,
even to this day, at 98 years old, like my
Yep.
grandmother will save like every rubber band, every twist tie. Like if there is a moldy piece of bread, she will like cut it in half and she's like, you just don't eat the moldy part. And I'm like, we don't have to do that. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
More
And
than okay. So, but
and
it's a hard thing to watch.
it is, but it's also, they are protecting themselves, right? So they had to be resourceful in order to survive. And
Hmm.
so a part of her is still in that survival mode, which if you think about it, that kind of sucks, right? Like that still sticks there until we process it, resolve it, heal it, all of that. And so that's why it's so, so important that we do this work because those things, and they get passed down generationally too, right? So I
Hmm.
look at my grandma had that behavior that was passed down to the next generation, and we're over here, my sister and I are over here trying to, like, minimalize as much as possible, right? So it's kind of like, right, we kind of have to look at, also generational things that have led to this point, but that is how it works right there. So the rewiring comes from understanding the patterns, what has happened.
Hmm.
It really starts with that awareness. So when we think about that tendency or that urge to hoard resources, why is that our behavior? What happened? Were we in such a situation that we had, 50 cents to our name. And so we really had to be very creative about this and we had to hold everything that we had together because what if we can't buy it the next time, right?
Hmm.
So, so what I just described there is an emotional event. uh, That's survival, right? That's fight or flight. That's like
Yeah.
your really primal stuff happening.
Hmm.
So you have activated that unsafe, belief within based on that emotionally impactful experience. And then you go on to, then your behaviors will reflect what you think and feel based on that belief. So if you're scared that you're going to run out of things, you're going to save as much as you can. You're going to hoard that for the future, right? So rewiring comes in when we can understand, okay, this event impacted us. This is how we now have formed this belief. This is the belief I've formed. This is what it makes me think. This is what it makes me feel. And this is how it makes me act. This is the process I run through with my clients. I give them a chart to document this whole process. We talk through it, we go through it together. But this is such the important work because then what we want to do is go to that desensitization, right? So we are super sensitized with the emotions and like the fears and scarcity, right? All the things that go with that. And what we want to do is create space and remove the emotional attachment to that situation. And then we want to move toward creating a new preferred supportive adaptive belief. So, if the belief is I'm not safe, I'm not safe with money, it's I am safe with money. I have an abundance of money, right? Like we want to create a new belief that is going to support us and reflect the future that we want. Then we have to, in creating that new neural network, it's how do we create the bridge to get from I'm not safe with money to, I have more than enough or whatever that is. We have to find evidence. Our brain loves evidence. So we have to find evidence of that and create it. If it doesn't exist, we have to almost imagine it to be real because our brain, there's a part in there that doesn't know the difference. That's why when we wake up from a dream, sometimes we're like, did that really
Yeah,
happen?
that was really real.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because our brain's so powerful in that way. And so those are some exercises that I do with my clients as well to build on that belief of, I have more than enough. And then that becomes more familiar. The more that you think about that and act in that and feel into that, and then that becomes the reality.
And it's also interesting because, I'm thinking of it from the financial side more strategically in the investing. It's like we need to be doing this work because women statistically, the most recent statistic that I've seen is that compared to men, women will invest only 30 cents on the dollar,
Okay.
which is insane because if you sit there and think about it, we keep 70% of our money in cash because they are like, we need to squirrel it away. We need to keep it like we have that like protecting mentality of like keep it in, but then we miss out on building so much wealth.
Great point. Yes. And a lot of times, again, our brain is wired to, like you said, protect us. And so if we observe a risk, right? If we assess and say, that's risky, which how many times have we heard that about the stock market? That's a generational thing passed down, right?
Yep.
We do miss out. We do miss out because we're observing that as a risk. I also think about in the US and, I don't know, have timeframes for different countries as well, but like I just was looking at a social media post the other day and it was talking about how just really recently, women still couldn't have opened their own bank account by themselves, purchase land, right? All of these things that we can do now, thankfully. But it was also another time when you had to keep resources on hand. Where could you put them, right?
Yeah, you had nowhere else to go. And so we've seen, the generations before us where it's like, okay, you couldn't have a credit card. Like you couldn't go and do these things. So we're
Right.
used to, I think of like both you and I run our own businesses, right? Like getting a small business loan or grants even was, or any type of funding was so unheard of for the generations before us. So to have, there's a lot of the old mentality, and there is still some of this is true, right? Like having emergency savings, keeping these things, but in proportion, right? But it's not the old adage of like, we need to keep all of this cash stockpiled away because there is nowhere else for us to get money or to go to. Like now we have more resources and more accessibility, but your brain doesn't automatically know that. So I'm sure that's part of the rewiring process is realizing like in my world, right? Like my grandmother, she couldn't get her own credit card when she got married or go get business funding if she wanted it. Like those weren't options for her. And I'm so thankful for the generations before me that changed that and created this path for me. But I then have to rewire of like the things that they are saying are because it was different back then.
Right. Right. And that goes to the abundance is everywhere. There's money everywhere, right? That's the type of mindset that we want to create to help us feel confident when we're selling, when we're pricing, when we are, buying, right? Because that impacts all of those decisions. If we've got that scarcity mindset where we don't know where our next dollar is coming from, we're going to be risk averse and we're going to just keep it all here.
Yeah. And part of that too is feeds into the whole like advocating for your worth, making sure you're getting paid enough because you're sitting there and you talk also. I spend a lot of time talking about the wealth gap and the pay gap. And the pay gap feeds into the wealth gap. If you're paid less, you'll build less wealth and the accumulation of that. And so it starts with just the moments of like, understanding and internalizing, no, I'm good enough. I am qualified for this job. I deserve to be paid X, Y, and Z, which is a whole, that feeds so much that confidence level into building wealth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%. 100%. And if you think about, there is a model that I love to use. It's the internal family systems model by Dr. Richard Schwartz. And he is also a therapist who's worked with many different types of folks. And he created this model of how our internal kind of parts, our thoughts, feelings work together or against each other, right? Sometimes. But really, it's about tapping into our core self. And in that core self, and according to his model, there is that confidence, compassion, courage, clarity, um, confidence, right? All of it's like the 7 or 8 C's, right? So it's a lot of those pieces that we need to be able to drive our leadership forward, to drive our success forward. And so being able to switch your mindset over out of a place of fear, out of a place of scarcity, and into confidence, expansion, abundance. that takes some work, but it's so, so worth it because those are the people, right, who are able to soar and keep that momentum going.
And I think a lot of that feeds into then you're able to mentor and set that, as I mentioned with the generations before me that have made so much of this possible, to then sit there and say, okay, I now have this wealth. I'm going to also turn around and pay it forward, and help the person behind me. That's something that women do 10 times over. And I feel like all of these pieces that we are putting together through this conversation all feed into that building a wealthy mindset. It's so much of like going back and understanding where you were, and where you came from, where are you now? And then let's also talk a little bit about like visualization for the future and setting goals about wealth and the future.
Yes. Okay. So something that I love to do, I was doing this quarterly, and I think I'm going to offer something a little bit more in depth with that this go around. But basically, it's having a clear vision. So when we talk about again tapping into the core self, it's clarity. And so when you have a clear vision of what you want, it's going to be easier for you to make a path to get there. Even if you don't know the how, that's okay. But knowing where you want to go is going to write your steps, basically, right? So I would say getting a clear vision, thinking about what you want your wealth to look like, your legacy, your future, if you plan to have a family or not, if you want to contribute to the community in a big way, what does that look like? So how are you going to invest your money? And, for folks who are listening who maybe aren't, overflowing with money at this point right in the second, where can you invest your resources and time as well,
Mhm.
your knowledge, your expertise to help you kind of keep that abundance mindset going. But it's really getting clear about what is it that you want. Do you want your children to have their college paid for? Do you want your family to not struggle with money? These are the things I'm hearing, from my clients as well. So it's like, how do we plan for that, and how do we reach bigger than we have ever thought we could before? Because that's another thing too, is sometimes with scarcity mindset or a lived past experience where money was difficult, it feels hard to dream sometimes, dream big. It feels very scary. So being able to allow that process. The other thing that we're going to do in one of my upcoming programs is create a mind movie. So I'll tell you how to do that, and you all can do that too if you want. So
Mhm.
it can be related to everything, not just money, but you can focus on money, wealth, building if you want for this. But go on Canva, go on some sort of video creation software to be helpful. But I want you to create scenes, pictures that represent what you want. Maybe add a little bit of calming music to it. So you can do this, right? You can create this so that you can just kind of watch it, or you can do this in your mind too. You can do this mentally, but run it in the morning, run it before you go to sleep. Give your brain that priming, that familiarity with these things. Because
Mhm.
sometimes, if we want, I don't know, a jet. If we want to buy a jet and we have never been in a jet, we don't know what that looks like, right?
Like,
Like we
what
don't
is a
have
jet? Like,
planning.
let's visualize that.
Yeah, like how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
So we want to make that familiar. It's very unfamiliar, and our brain is like, wait, what? What? Right? So we want to make that as familiar as possible. So play
Mm.
those scenes, play the things that you want, make that familiar, put the languaging that you want. I have my vision board over here, and it says normalize making 100K months, 15 hours a week or less. I know people have done it. Why can't I? Right?
Yeah.
So we got to get that language, those thought processes familiar and repeatable. Your brain is always looking for evidence and problems to solve. And so that's what we want to give it here.
That's also great because, especially if it's not something you've seen present in your life, with the way we have social media these days. And I also really emphasize people on getting clear on what you want, right? Not what the world tells you to have. Maybe you don't want a jet and you're like, I just want to be able to fly first class every time I go. Like,
Exactly.
that's probably like more my thing, is I'm like, I don't need the plane, but like I want to go first class. I love that whole thing of getting on the plane, settling down and being done with it. But so I look now for evidence when I go places, and I like focus. Like when I get on a plane and I'm seeing the people in first class, I'm like, okay, like that's going to be me. And like I talk to myself about it, and I take that time, because even though that's not something my family has done in the past, that doesn't mean it can't be me.
Correct. Very good. Yes. Exactly. And so, yeah, that's the thing is like you want to make that familiar if that's something you've never seen before for your own family or for people that you know. And it might not be, a jet, it might not even be first class. It might be that you want to own your own farm because, eggs are so wild out here. So it's like, do you want your own chicken coop? Like whatever you
Yeah.
want. Okay. But you've got to speak that into existence, speak about it positively, speak about it as if it's already happened. There
Mhm.
is a book I'm reading right now. It is called Magic I think it's by Rhonda Burns. And it talks about how gratitude will bring that abundance in. And so there's a lot of great gratitude practices. And one of those is be thankful as if the thing has already happened, right? So we have to, again, normalize that and make that so real and tangible in our brain.
And it sounds so woo woo, redundant,
Oh, it
whatever you
does.
want to
Yeah,
say.
it
It
does.
is, but it is something about like you watch Kim Kardashian has a jet, right? She has Kim Air, I think it's called. I started out really confidently knowing what it was, and I'm not quite sure. So, and you look at it and you're like, there's no way I could ever have this. But then you see on social media all these people who like rented a jet or did this. So if that's what you truly want, like why can't you have it, right? And normalizing, but is and making sure though, I always like to gut check people and say, okay, is this what you want? Because I had a client
That's a
once.
great piece. I do the same thing, right? Yeah,
Yep.
because it's like, even in our businesses, we can start to do kind of that copycat thing and say, oh,
Mhm.
well, I have to mimic this other person's launch process or sequence or sales cycle or whatever that is. And it's like, no, I
No,
don't
you
like
don't.
that. That feels terrible and that feels resistance, and that's not going to work out, right? So same thing with the things that people want, even if want to buy your own personal private jet, right? But then when you get it, it'll feel empty if that's not really what you want. So let's spend your energy on things that do align with you. That's another one of my main pillars is making sure that things are in alignment with what you truly want, need, desire.
I also find on the financial side, if it's not what you really want, like you will unconsciously sabotage it. Like all of a sudden a financial emergency will come up. Oh, I need to drain the account where we had the money for the second home in there. And I'm like, I've had those moments where I like check in with clients and I'm like, is this what you really want? Or
Yeah.
is this what? And they're like, well, like my parents always went there and they loved it. So, and I'm like, but do you go there and love it?
Right.
And that's when we start to like unpack and I notice and I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't think you want this. And so you like unconsciously sabotage it and like the money doesn't show up or
Right.
whatever it could be, or you find a way to spend it because it's not what you truly want. And it's just, and then you get frustrated with yourself. And
Yeah.
it's okay to not want to keep up with the Joneses or have I know people that never want to buy a home. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you just can't lie and say, like, well, I have to live the American dream and I have to have 2.3 kids and a golden retriever and a house and go take 2 weeks vacation every year. That's not what you want. You will sabotage it every time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what are some things that people can do, like two or three things right now, bite size, to start this rewiring process?
So making sure you know your money story first and foremost. I think Caroline has some resources. I have a worksheet that I'm going to offer for you guys to work through this. But really getting clear about what that story was, what your wealth blueprint was growing up, and how that is showing up for you today. So the awareness piece is really always number one. Get really clear about what are your thoughts, feelings, what are your behaviors around money. So is it avoidance? Is it overspending? Is it hoarding? Is it, what is it? Right. So knowing what that is for you, and maybe there's certain situations where things trigger you a little bit more. And understanding, like, dig in. Why? Just keep asking yourself that question until you hit, more solid answers and kind of get to the root of it. So that would be my first recommendation. And then, of course, when I work with my clients, we go really deep into it and we work on, again, bridging the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. And that's the in-depth stuff that comes
That's
next.
awesome. Yeah, and having that clarity, I always love that too. Of the it's I think of like a 2-year-old, like my 2-year-old me going, but why? But why? And continuing to dig deeper because there's always more in there, and all these memories start to come up, and you're like, whoa, where did this come from?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
crazy. It's That's crazy. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. We like to end with one question and then I'll have you share all of your information. What is something that you do every day that makes you feel wealthy?
Hmm. Feel wealthy. I give gratitude. I think that's something that I try to wake up and just thank God that I'm alive. I think especially after a kind of a health scare, following birth of my child, I was very thankful, like very, very thankful more than ever to be alive and just carrying that with me because, I talk a lot about wealth, but I think wealth is also in health,
Yeah,
mental, emotional, physical, right? And so, I always thank God for the stuff that I have, my family, my health, my ability to take a walk down the street, the house that we live in, right? Like, even if it's not like your ideal 100% vision right this second, it's still serving you. And how is it serving you? And so, really, it's giving that gratitude. I think that's what reminds me like, I'm already wealthy, I've already got abundance. Here it is.
I love that. And also I'm always reminded of like the things that you have now were things that one time you had prayed for is
Yeah.
always the one that I come back to. And it's like, you're always so focused on the general use, everyone. We're so focused on like getting ahead in this next thing. And there is so much about being grateful in this moment and realizing like you used to pray to have days like this or moments like this or just see the sun out and the birds chirping. And that's really awesome. So if people want to connect with you after listening in today, where is the best place to find you? We will also link all of your information and that wealth blueprint here in the show notes.
Awesome, great. So I'm on all social media at the Angela Marie Williams. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, those are kind of my main hangouts. You can also visit me at one of the websites. So we've got Health and Wellness Collective.com. That is going to be coaching consulting on that side. And then Angela Marie Coaching or Angela Marie, yeah, sorry, AngelaMarie.co is where Angela Marie Coaching is housed. That's where you can get all of the different freebies that I've talked about, where you can get the money mindset, you can get meditations, right, all that good stuff. I also talk about CEOs, women leading businesses, and how we can take care of ourselves more mentally, physically, emotionally, right? It's all about that mindset. So please connect with me. I'd love to have you come say hi in any way that you feel comfortable. And thanks for having me so much. This is great.
Of course, thanks everyone for listening in, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.